The first light of dawn crept across the Manhattan skyline, slipping through the towering glass windows of the Park Avenue penthouse as if it, too, were bracing for the moment of impact. Brandon Walsh pushed through the front door at 5:17 a.m., the metallic click echoing through the silent apartment. His tuxedo jacket hung loosely over his arm, still carrying the faint scent of Aubrey's expensive perfume, sharp, sugary, unmistakable. His tie was crooked, his hair was tousled, and his smile, drunk, lazy, triumphant, was the smile of a man certain he would never pay the price for anything he did. He tossed his Mercedes key fob onto the marble console, barely missing a framed photo of him and his wife on their last anniversary. Lillian leaning into him, a soft smile on her face, her eyes glowing with the kind of sincerity Brandon never deserved. He glanced at the picture for half a second, then scoffed under his breath and walked toward the bedroom. The penthouse was unusually still. No sound of the kettle humming, no soft footsteps, no distant rustle from the nursery room Lillian had been preparing. Nothing, just a cold, heavy silence that pressed against his skin. He didn't notice it. He didn't notice anything. Not until he opened the bedroom door. The sunlight touched the bed first, illuminating the immaculate white sheets and the single, devastating object resting on his pillow. Brandon blinked, confused. His steps slowed. There it was. A stack of papers, neatly aligned, unsmudged, waiting. A gold wedding ring sat beside it like a punctuation mark. And on top of everything, one photo from a sonogram. His sonogram, their child. Brandon's smile vanished. He moved closer, the air thickening with every step. His throat tightened as he picked up the document. Petition for divorce. State of New York. His name. Her signature. Dated yesterday. His pulse quickened. A faint buzzing filled his ears. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in, suffocating him. He flipped the page. A USB drive was clipped to the second sheet. Beneath it, one handwritten note in Lillian's delicate, steady handwriting. When you came home late the first time, I forgave you. When you lied the 10th time, I broke. Last night was my answer. I choose our child over your betrayal. By the time you read this, I'm gone. Do not look for me, Lillian. He dropped onto the edge of the bed, gripping the papers, breath shallow. For the first time in years, Brandon Walsh felt something unfamiliar. Not guilt, not regret, but fear. A deep, primal fear that the woman he thought would never leave him had walked out of his life forever. And this was only the beginning of his downfall. The worst part was still waiting inside that USB. Long before her world collapsed, before the betrayal carved a permanent scar across her heart, Lillian Harper had always believed in quiet strength. Not the loud, demanding kind her husband wielded at every boardroom table, but the gentle, steady kind that held a family together, that turned a cold penthouse into a home, that whispered hope even in the darkest seasons of life. Back when she first moved to New York at 19, she had nothing but a scholarship, a second-hand suitcase, and a dream to become an interior architect capable of shaping spaces that made people feel safe. Growing up in foster homes across Ohio taught her early that safety was a privilege, not a guarantee. So she built her own version of it in every place she lived. Warm lights, soft linens, gentle corners. She knew how to create peace because she had spent so much of her life searching for it. By the time she was 31, she had finally carved out a life that felt stable. A career at a respected Manhattan design studio. Loyal clients who trusted her taste. A reputation for solving impossible problems with calm brilliance. Then came Brandon Walsh, a polished executive with a confident smile and the kind of charm that could disarm anyone. For reasons she would question later, she let him in. She softened. She allowed herself to believe she could be loved without being hurt. They married 2 years later. And slowly, almost invisibly, the life she built began to shift under Brandon's influence. At first, he encouraged her career. Later, he criticized it. At first, he admired her independence. Later, he saw it as a threat. At first, he promised partnership. Later, he rewrote her accomplishments as his own. By the time she became pregnant, the imbalance was complete. Brandon turned her pregnancy into a PR tool for his corporate image. He insisted she stop traveling for work. He suggested she take fewer clients. He quietly redirected one of her biggest projects to a junior designer he favored. When she cried that night, he accused her of being dramatic and hormonal. Still, she tried. She held the marriage together. She held herself together. She showed up to prenatal appointments alone, clutching her ultrasound images like little proofs of hope. She stayed late at work to make up for lost income. She reassured her unborn child that things would get better, that daddy was just busy, that families go through phases. But deep inside, she knew something was wrong. The first time she smelled perfume on Brandon's shirt, she forgave him. The second time, she questioned herself. The 10th time, she stopped sleeping. Her friends told her she looked pale. Her coworkers whispered that she was shrinking into someone she wasn't. Yet she endured until that night at 3 a.m., when she opened Brandon's credit card statement and saw the charge for a luxury suite at the Ritz-Carlton Central Park, and the name signed on the receipt, Aubrey Sloan. In that moment, Lillian Harper stopped breaking. She started planning. The Park Avenue penthouse had once felt like a promise. The glass walls that framed the Manhattan skyline, the soft golden lighting Brandon insisted was perfect for entertaining. The marble floors. Lillian spent hours choosing. Every detail seemed to whisper the life she believed she was building. Stable, warm, lasting. But over time, the penthouse became something else entirely. It became a stage. A stage where Lillian played the role of the supportive wife, the polished hostess, the woman who greeted Brandon's colleagues with a gracious smile while quietly holding her stomach to steady the nausea from her pregnancy. A stage where nothing was real except her exhaustion. Where every room carried traces of Brandon's ego, his rules, his unpredictable moods. He loved the view because it made him feel powerful. She loved it because it made her feel less alone. During daylight, the penthouse buzzed with the sound of Brandon's phone calls, sharp orders, fake laughter, deals being closed as he paced across the living room. At night, the space fell into a thick coldness, the kind Lillian wrapped herself in because there was no warmth left between them. The places that once held joy now haunted her. The kitchen, where Brandon dismissed her morning sickness as overreacting. If you count of the story, the living room, where he announced he would be traveling more for networking. The bedroom, where the bed felt too big and too empty after he stopped coming home. The nursery, half-finished, untouched, a silent witness to everything she feared. Even outside the penthouse, the world seemed to close in on her. The design studio in Soho, where she once thrived, now felt like a reminder of opportunities slipping away. Brandon's subtle interference had cost her 2 major clients, and she felt it in every quiet conversation her co-workers exchanged when they thought she couldn't hear. At the prenatal clinic on the Upper East Side, she often sat alone, watching other expectant mothers laugh with their partners. She learned to pretend she didn't notice. She learned to hold her ultrasound photos close to her heart and whisper promises only her baby could hear. And then there was the city itself. Vast, glittering, indifferent. The yellow cabs rushing down Lexington Avenue. The smell of roasted nuts from street vendors. The winter wind that sliced between skyscrapers. Once, New York had been her playground. Now, it felt like a maze she was trapped inside. But the worst place, the place that cut the deepest, was Brandon's office near Wall Street. She had stopped visiting months ago, yet she could still picture the sleek glass lobby, the receptionist who always stared a little too long, the board members who treated her like a prop in Brandon's life. That world was his, and he never let her forget it. Yet despite the cold, despite the loneliness, despite the cruelty that pressed on her chest every time she walked through the penthouse door, Lillian held on. Held on to hope, held on to dignity, held on to the tiny heartbeat she carried, a reminder that something beautiful still belonged to her. She didn't know it yet, but this world, this cold, polished, merciless world was about to shift. And she was the one who would change it. Before the world discovered who Brandon Walsh truly was, Lillian had already begun to see the cracks, hairline fractures beneath the polished surface he showed everyone else. To the public, Brandon was the rising star of Manhattan's tech finance world. Sharp, calculated, charming in the way that made investors drop their guard and reporters give him glowing headlines. But behind closed doors, the man she married was someone else entirely. Brandon was a collector. He collected admiration. He collected praise. And eventually, he collected women. For years, he hid behind expensive suits, staged philanthropy, and a picture-perfect marriage he used as a business asset. The penthouse, the dinners at the plaza, the vacations in the Hamptons, none of it was for them. It was for him. For the image, for the illusion. And when he met Aubrey Sloane, everything about him changed. Aubrey was exactly the kind of woman Brandon liked to orbit around when no one was watching. Young, hungry for attention, and eager to attach herself to a man with power. She worked in luxury event PR, spending her nights in glittering ballrooms and her mornings posting filtered selfies on Instagram with strategic hashtags. Brandon was one more accessory she wanted to add to her curated lifestyle. Their affair didn't start with passion. It started with ego. Aubrey knew how to stroke Brandon's pride, how to make him feel invincible. She praised his speeches, bragged about his genius, and slipped her hand into his arm at every event as if she had already claimed him. And Brandon, who lived on flattery the way others lived on oxygen, fell for it instantly. Signs of the affair trickled into Lillian's life, slowly like poison disguised as perfume. A lipstick stain inside a shirt collar. A late-night charge from a rooftop bar on Fifth Avenue. A text message on Brandon's phone that he claimed was a work joke. But the moment that shattered everything wasn't a message or a receipt. It was the anonymous photo. It arrived one evening while Lillian was sitting on the bedroom floor, folding tiny baby clothes. Her phone buzzed. No name, just a New York number. Attached was a photo of Brandon at a fundraiser 3 nights earlier. He wasn't standing beside his colleagues. He wasn't even pretending to network. He was standing behind Aubrey, his hand on the small of her back, whispering into her ear with a smile Lillian hadn't seen in months. Under the photo was one line. You shouldn't raise a child with a man who treats you like a placeholder. Lillian stared at the screen until her eyes burned. Every instinct she had tried to suppress, every doubt, every fear, finally crystallized into truth. Brandon wasn't having a moment of weakness. He wasn't going through a phase. He wasn't confused or stressed or overwhelmed. He was gone. And Aubrey? Aubrey wasn't just a mistake. She was a threat. A threat to Lillian. A threat to her career. A threat to her unborn child. But neither of them knew something crucial. Lillian Harper was done suffering in silence, and she was about to fight back. The night it happened had started like any other, a quiet evening, soft lamplight, and Lillian sitting on the couch with her laptop balanced on her knees, sketching the layout for a client's penthouse renovation. Her back ached, her eyelids felt heavy, and she had one hand resting protectively over her belly. She kept glancing at the clock. Brandon had promised he'd be home by 8. He didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't even bother to lie. By 9:30, the silence of the apartment felt suffocating. Lillian tried distracting herself by scrolling through design portfolios, but the anxiety pressed against her ribs. She reached for the remote, planning to mute the world with a documentary, when a notification flashed across her phone. Brandon Walsh spotted at Midtown Gala, posted by a local society gossip page, one known for being painfully accurate. Her heart thudded. She clicked the post, and there he was. Brandon Walsh, her husband, in a tailored black tuxedo, standing on the red carpet in front of photographers. Not alone. Not even pretending to be. His arm was wrapped around Aubrey Sloane, who was wearing a champagne-colored gown that shimmered under the camera lights. The caption beneath the photo read, "New power couple. Brandon Walsh brings PR darling Aubrey Sloane as his date to the Tech Vision charity gala." Date. They called her his date. For a moment, Lillian couldn't move. Her breath caught in her throat, her vision blurred, and all she could hear was the pounding of her own heartbeat. She zoomed into the photo, Brandon's hand pressed firmly at the curve of Aubrey's hip, the two of them whispering and smiling like they shared a secret. A secret Lillian had never been meant to know. She scrolled further. There was a video. And that was where the humiliation truly began. The clip showed Brandon and Aubrey entering the ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, the chandeliers casting golden light over their polished silhouettes. As they reached the center of the room, someone behind the camera called out, "Brandon, where's your wife?" Aubrey let out a soft laugh, the kind people make when they're enjoying someone else's pain. Brandon didn't look embarrassed. He didn't look surprised. He didn't even look conflicted. He just smirked. "She's unavailable," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "These events require energy she doesn't have right now." The way he said it, so dismissive, so smug, felt like a knife sliding straight into Lillian's chest. Unavailable. Like she was an inconvenience. Like she was nothing. Comments flooded the post within minutes. Some defending Aubrey. some mocking Lillian, some speculating she wasn't good enough to keep her husband interested. Lillian put her phone down, but her hands were shaking so violently she almost dropped it. She pressed a palm to her belly, whispering an apology to her unborn child as tears streamed down her cheeks. It was no longer suspicion, no longer fear. This was public humiliation. Brandon had just announced to the world that she was irrelevant. But he had also, without knowing it, given her the strength she needed to walk away. And the world was about to watch her rise. The hours after the gala felt like moving through a storm she couldn't escape. Lillian tried to sleep, tried to calm her racing heart, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw the image of Brandon's hand on Aubrey's waist. The humiliation twisted inside her like a blade. By midnight, she was pacing the living room barefoot, clutching a throw blanket around her shoulders like armor she didn't believe in. The city outside sparkled, indifferent to her pain. Manhattan never stopped for anyone, not even a woman whose marriage had just crumbled. At 1:12 a.m., the first contraction-like cramp shot through her abdomen. It wasn't labor, but it was fear. The kind that made her drop to her knees beside the couch, both hands gripping her stomach. She whispered, "It's okay, Mommy's here," even though she didn't feel present at all. She felt like she was falling into grief, into anger, into uncertainty too wide to measure. She crawled onto the sofa, pulling a pillow against her chest. She wanted to call someone Maeve, her friend, or Jonathan, though she barely knew him, or even the clinic hotline. But the humiliation was still too raw. She couldn't make herself speak, couldn't form words, couldn't admit out loud what had happened. Her phone buzzed. It was Brandon. "Don't wait up. Staying at the office." Staying at the office. He was still lying. Even after being photographed with his mistress in front of the entire city, the sob tore out of her before she could stop it. She curled into herself, her body trembling. Every insecurity she'd buried, every fear from her childhood, every wound from being moved between foster homes, every moment she felt unwanted, rushed back like floodwater breaking through a dam. She thought she had grown past those things. She thought she had built a better life. But betrayal had a way of reopening the oldest scars. By 2 a.m., the cramps were worse. She could barely stand when she forced herself into the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and stared into the mirror. Her reflection startled her. Her eyes looked hollow. Her lips were pale. Her skin seemed drained of warmth. She looked like a ghost haunting her own life. Trembling, she slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold tile floor. Her phone slipped from her hand, landing beside her with a soft thud. She pressed both palms against her belly again and whispered, voice shaking, "I'm sorry you have to feel this. I'm so sorry." She didn't know how long she sat there. Minutes? An hour? Maybe longer. The pain eased, but the fear didn't. Exhaustion eventually forced her back to the living room, where she pulled the blanket around herself once more. She remembered something Maeve had once told her. Breaking isn't the end. It's the warning sign that you can't stay where you are. At the time, Lillian hadn't understood what it meant, but now shaking, humiliated, alone in the penthouse she once called home, it made sense. This was the breaking. The moment before everything changed, and in the morning, she would finally decide what came next. Morning arrived like an accusation, bright, merciless, exposing everything she had tried to hide in the shadows of the night. Lillian sat at the small breakfast table, untouched tea cooling beside her. Her body felt heavy, drained from hours of crying, but her mind was clearer than it had been in months. The humiliation still stung, but beneath it, something new was forming. Resolve. She opened her laptop and pulled up the file she had ignored for weeks. Project Horizon, lead designer, Lillian Harper. By their Street, it was the biggest contract of her career, one she had spent 6 months developing before Brandon quietly transferred credit to someone else. She remembered confronting him in the hallway outside the nursery. "Why did you remove my name?" He didn't even hesitate. "Because you're pregnant, Lillian. You can't handle the pressure. Someone reliable should take over." Reliable. Meaning, someone he controlled. Now, staring at the original designs, she felt something inside her ignite. She zoomed in, moved through the pages, tracing lines she had drawn with trembling excitement months before. Brandon had stolen this from her. But he didn't know one crucial thing. She still had the proof. At the bottom of her first draft was a time-stamped signature and a digital certificate automatically generated by her design software. It contained her ID, her login, and the date, 6 months before the junior designer Brandon favored even joined the team. A legal timestamp, a copyright marker, a weapon. Her heartbeat picked up. She clicked open another folder, one she hadn't touched since the night everything fell apart. Inside were screenshots, email threads, a picture taken by a coworker who suspected something was off. Brandon told the board, "You were overwhelmed," the message read. "We know that's not true. If you ever need support, I'm here." She hadn't understood why the coworker sent that. Now she did. Brandon's lie hadn't been private. He'd dragged her reputation through the mud to justify stealing her work. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her phone. She dialed Maeve. "You need to come over," she said, voice thin but steady. "I found something." Maeve arrived 20 minutes later, hair pulled back, wearing the same navy blazer she used in court. When Lillian showed her the digital certificates, the copied emails, and the project timeline, Maeve's expression shifted from concern to shock to something fierce. "Lillian," she whispered, "he didn't just cheat on you. He sabotaged your career. I know. This isn't just grounds for divorce. This is grounds for a lawsuit, a big one." Lillian swallowed. Her hand drifted to her belly again. "I want to protect my baby," she said softly. "I don't want him growing up with a father who destroys people." Maeve reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Then listen to me carefully," she said. "You're not powerless. You have leverage Brandon doesn't even know exists." And then she gave Lillian the words that would become the foundation of her entire comeback. "You're not leaving this marriage broken," Maeve said. "You're leaving it with everything Brandon tried to take from you." Lillian inhaled shakily. For the first time, she believed it. The next 72 hours moved with a clarity Lillian hadn't felt in years. Something inside her had shifted, a steel core awakening beneath the bruised softness. She was still heartbroken, still exhausted, still carrying the weight of a child inside her, but she wasn't helpless anymore. Her world hadn't ended. It had simply opened, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid to walk through it alone. She started with the practical things, the things Brandon counted on her never being strong enough to handle. She opened a new bank account and transferred the portion of her income she was legally entitled to. She printed her design drafts, organized emails in careful chronological order, and placed everything into a navy folder Maeve brought her. Maeve watched her as she worked. "You're handling this better than most people I've represented," she said. Lillian didn't look up. "I've survived worse," she murmured. She didn't say it out loud, but she remembered nights in foster homes when she counted cracks in the ceiling just to ignore the shouting downstairs. She remembered how she learned to pack a bag in under 10 minutes because sometimes she had to leave faster than she wanted. Survival wasn't new to her. She was simply rediscovering an old skill. On the second day, she went to the studio in Soho. The walk there felt surreal, her coat brushing her knees, the winter wind slicing down the avenues, the city humming around her. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. She just needed to see if she still belonged. When she stepped through the glass door, the room fell silent. A few colleagues looked up, startled. One of them, Alex, who had secretly sent her the photo months ago, stood from his desk. "Lillian, oh my God, are you okay?" She forced a small smile. "I will be." End quote. He guided her to her old workstation. Everything was exactly as she left it, the mood boards pinned neatly, the sample tiles stacked by color. The familiarity steadied her. "Brandon told everyone you were overwhelmed," Alex whispered. "No one believed him. He just didn't expect you to come back." Lillian's jaw tightened. "That's why I'm here," she said quietly, "to remind myself this place was mine before it was ever his." And Desider. She spent the next 3 hours restoring her files, scanning through her blueprints, marking details on her iPad. With every line she redrew, she felt the fog inside her lift. For weeks, she had let Brandon shrink her world. Now, piece by piece, she was taking it back. By late afternoon, she walked out of the studio lighter, her steps more certain. Maeve was waiting for her outside with 2 cups of tea. "How'd it go?" Maeve asked. Lillian wrapped her fingers around the warm cup. "I remembered who I was," she said. "And that was enough." Maeve smiled softly. "Good, because what comes next, you'll need that version of yourself." Lillian looked up at the sky, gray, heavy, but open, then exhaled. Whatever storm was coming, she was no longer trembling through it. She was ready. It was supposed to be a quiet night. Lillian had planned to finish reorganizing the documents for Maeve and then finally get some rest. Her body was tired in the way only pregnancy could create: heavy feet, swollen hands, a constant pressure in her ribs. She stood in the nursery, smoothing her palm over the half-finished mural that she once painted with shy excitement. The soft colors, the little clouds, the watercolor moon, none of it felt real anymore. Then her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it. Almost. But the preview text froze her blood. He's here with her again. It was from Alex. Confused, she tapped the message. A link appeared. It opened to a live stream from the Metropolitan Crest Gala, one of the most exclusive events of the season, held at the ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. The camera swept across the glittering crowd, celebrities, CEOs, politicians, until it landed on two painfully familiar faces. Brandon, Aubrey, walking hand in hand down the marble staircase like royalty. Lillian's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to keep watching. She needed to see. She needed the truth laid out in front of her, with no more denial, no more pretending. Brandon paused at the bottom of the stairs, adjusting his cufflinks. Aubrey leaned into him, whispering something that made him grin, the same grin he used to reserve for Lillian when the world felt too big and he wanted to make her laugh. Now, it belonged to someone else. The reporter stepped forward. Brandon, Aubrey, mind giving us a quote? Aubrey lit up, flipping her hair back in that dramatic way people used when they knew cameras were watching. It's a special night, she said smoothly. We're celebrating big changes. Lillian's heartbeat stuttered. Brandon smirked. Life's too short to hold on to things that don't fit anymore. Things. Not people. Not marriages. Not families. Things. The reporter laughed as if betrayal were amusing. So rumors are true? You two are official? Aubrey didn't hesitate. She touched Brandon's chest playfully. Very, she said. The crowd around them applauded. Flashes burst like fireworks. Someone shouted, "Where's your wife tonight, Brandon?" His answer came without shame. Where she belongs, at home. Lillian's vision blurred. The humiliation of being dismissed, minimized, and erased in front of New York's elite sliced deeper than any private betrayal ever had. And then another blow. The camera zoomed in just as Aubrey laid her hand on Brandon's arm and whispered, "She's holding you back, baby. Let her go." Lillian shut the laptop. Her hands were shaking too hard to breathe, let alone move. But then something unexpected happened. Something sharp. Something that didn't feel like pain. A clarity, cold, precise, settled over her. He wasn't coming back. He didn't deserve to. And she wasn't going to wait one more night for him to choose her. The choice was already made. She stood up, steadying herself with one hand on the wall. Tomorrow, she would become someone Brandon never expected. Tomorrow, she would disappear from his world. Lillian didn't sleep after watching the gala stream. She spent the rest of the night sitting on the nursery floor, her back against the wall, her hands wrapped around her belly as if protecting the tiny heartbeat inside her from the world outside. The room was dim, lit only by the moonlight slipping through the half-closed blinds. In that quiet glow, the truth became painful, but undeniable. She wasn't leaving because Brandon cheated. She wasn't leaving because he humiliated her. She was leaving because staying meant slowly disappearing. At 4 a.m., she rose with a steadiness she didn't fully understand. She moved through the penthouse like a ghost, reclaiming her freedom. No tears, no hesitation. It was as if her body already knew the path she had to walk, and now her heart was simply catching up. She took out a small suitcase, one she hadn't touched since their last anniversary trip, and placed it on the bed. She packed only essentials: a few clothes, prenatal vitamins, her laptop, the folder of documents Maeve had helped assemble. She left behind dresses Brandon liked, jewelry he bought for photo ops, and all the carefully staged pieces of the life he crafted for her image. Next came the ring. She slid it off her finger. It left a faint, pale circle on her skin, a ghost of promises broken. She placed it gently on his pillow, right where his head rested when he pretended to love her. Then she turned to her desk, opened her notebook, and wrote the letter she had been holding inside her chest for far too long. Her handwriting trembled, but her words were clear, sharper than she expected. Brandon, this marriage was supposed to be a place where we grew, not a place where I shrank. I will not raise a child with a man who lies, cheats, and humiliates the woman who built a home for him. By the time you read this, I will be somewhere safe. Please do not try to find me. I am choosing peace for myself and our child, something you were never willing to give. Lillian. She folded it carefully, placed it next to the ring, and stepped back. The silence of the penthouse felt different now, not oppressive, but empty, cleansed, like a stage after the curtain falls. She walked to the living room one last time, touched the frame of the sonogram photo hanging on the wall, and whispered, "We're leaving, baby. We deserve better." At 5:02 a.m., she grabbed her coat, slipped on her flats, and opened the front door. The city outside was still dark, still half asleep. A light mist hung in the air, softening the glow of the street lamps. She didn't look back. Maeve was waiting for her at the curb, engine running, eyes fierce with loyalty. "Ready?" Maeve asked gently. Lillian nodded, more than ever. She climbed into the car. As the penthouse faded into the distance, the weight on her chest finally lifted. She wasn't escaping. She wasn't defeated. She was beginning. Brandon stumbled into the penthouse just after dawn, still riding the high of the gala, Aubrey's perfume clinging to his collar. The night had fed every part of his ego, flashing lights, whispered praise, another magazine editor promising him a feature. He felt invincible, untouchable, on top of the world. So he didn't notice the wrongness at first. Not the silence. Not the emptiness. Not the faint draft coming from the slightly open balcony door. He kicked off his shoes, loosened his tie, and walked toward the bedroom with a self-satisfied smirk. He rehearsed the excuse he planned to give Lillian another late meeting, maybe a networking emergency. She would believe it. She always did. But when he reached the bedroom door, the smirk slowly dissolved. The bed was made. Perfectly made. Lillian never made the bed before leaving for her appointments. She always said mornings were for soft beginnings, not tight corners. But today, the sheets looked untouched, carved with hospital-level precision. It was the first crack in his reality. "Lil?" he called, forcing a casual tone. "You up?" Silence answered him. He stepped closer, and that was when he saw it, the small silver object glinting on the pillow. His ring, her ring, and beneath them, a neatly stacked bundle of papers. His chest tightened. No, she wouldn't. He grabbed the stack and flipped the first page. Petition for divorce. State of New York. His breath froze in his lungs. He scanned the lines, grounds, claims, attachments. His vision blurred. His hand shook. And then he saw it. The sonogram photos slipped between the pages. Their child, the baby he barely acknowledged. The baby he never made time to see. He let the papers fall onto the bed. "Lillian?" he called again, louder this time, no charm, no arrogance, just fear. He rushed through the penthouse, checking the kitchen, the nursery, the hall closet. The nursery hit him like a punch. The tiny onesies were gone. The rocking chair cushion was missing. The mobile she hung above the crib had been taken down, not stolen, removed. Intentionally. As if she were erasing her existence from the home they once shared. His breathing turned shallow. In the living room, he spotted something on the coffee table, a navy folder. His stomach dropped when he opened it. Printouts, emails, screenshots, receipts, evidence. So much evidence that his vision went white around the edges. She hadn't just left. She hadn't just taken the child. She had built a case. And she had done it without him noticing. No, this isn't happening, he whispered, gripping the back of a chair. She wouldn't leave me. But she had. For the first time since he met her, Brandon felt the floor shift beneath him. His kingdom, his image, his control was cracking. He reached for his phone, hands trembling, and called her number. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. A cold realization seeped in. Lillian wasn't coming back. And he was no longer the man in charge. She had left on her terms, and this was only the beginning of his unraveling. By Monday morning, the shock had begun to calcify into a cold, simmering fury inside Brandon. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. Every room of the penthouse felt haunted, her absence echoing louder than any argument they'd ever had. But beneath the panic was something uglier. Entitlement. He still believed he could fix this with charm, manipulation, or force of habit. So when he received an email from Porter and Finch Family Law, notifying him of an emergency meeting requested on Lillian's behalf, he smirked. She wanted to meet? Perfect. He would talk some sense into her. He arrived at the firm's midtown office in a tailored suit, hair slicked back, expression crafted to project annoyance instead of fear. The receptionist led him to a conference room with glass walls overlooking Lexington Avenue. The door closed behind him with a quiet click. 2 women sat at the table. Lillian, and opposite her, Maeve Porter, her lawyer. Lillian looked different. Not stronger, no, not yet, but composed. Collected. Her spine straight, her hands resting gently on her stomach. Her eyes, though tired, held something he hadn't seen in years. Certainty. Brandon forced a smile. Lil, sweetheart, you didn't have to do all this. We can talk privately. Maeve's voice cut through the air like a blade. She doesn't speak to you alone. Not anymore. Brandon blinked. Excuse me? Given your recent conduct, Maeve continued calmly, all communication will go through me. Lillian didn't look away. Didn't flinch. Didn't defend him, the way she used to. Brandon felt something twist under his ribs. He dragged out a sigh, shifting into his familiar condescending tone. Lillian, come on. You're overreacting. You're pregnant. You're emotional. Whatever you think you saw, Maeve slid a folder across the table. Whatever she thinks she saw, she repeated softly. You mean the live stream watched by half of Manhattan? Brandon's jaw tightened. Maeve continued, her voice polite but ice cold. Let's begin. Lillian is filing for divorce on grounds of adultery, emotional abandonment, and career sabotage. Brandon barked a disbelieving laugh. Career sabotage? That's ridiculous. Exfession. Maeve opened another file. Your emails transferring her project to a junior designer say otherwise. His face drained. And then, she added, sliding forward a printed receipt. We have the Ritz-Carlton suite you booked under a corporate card. Business trip, he snapped. With champagne for 2? Maeve raised an eyebrow. And Miss Sloane signing the receipt? A vein pulsed in Brandon's neck. He turned to Lillian at last, frustration boiling over. Why are you doing this? You're my wife. Her reply was soft. I was your wife, she said, until you made sure I didn't exist in your life anymore. He swallowed hard. Something in her tone, calm, steady, utterly done, rattled him more than any accusation. Maeve gathered the documents. Here's how this works, Mr. Walsh. You cooperate, or we move straight to court, where every detail of your behavior becomes public record. Brandon finally understood. He wasn't negotiating. He wasn't in control. He wasn't intimidating anyone. He was losing. And Lillian wasn't afraid of him anymore. Thank you for watching. The Bagersias likes brag. They met the next afternoon at a quiet cafe near the Brooklyn Promenade. It was small, warm, nothing like the sleek restaurants Brandon preferred. Lillian slipped into a corner booth, instinctively pulling her coat closer around her belly. When Jonathan walked in, he searched the room until his eyes found hers and his expression softened. You look tired, he said honestly, sitting across from her, but stronger. She let out a shaky laugh. I don't feel strong. You left, he said. That's strength. The simplicity of the statement hit her harder than she expected. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. They talked for nearly 2 hours. About design, about her future, about the baby, about everything she hadn't allowed herself to dream of in months. At the end, Jonathan reached into his briefcase and slid a folder toward her. I have a proposal, he said quietly. Something that belongs to someone talented, someone honest, someone I trust. He met her eyes. Someone like you. She opened the folder and froze. A contract, a lead role, a new start. Jonathan smiled gently. You walked away from a nightmare, Lillian. Now I want to help you walk into something better. And for the first time since leaving Brandon, she felt hope. For the first time in months, Lillian woke with a sense of purpose instead of dread. The morning light spilling into Maeve's apartment felt warm, not harsh. Her body still carried exhaustion, but her spirit, fragile as it was, finally had space to breathe. She moved slowly, one hand supporting her belly, the other brushing across the folder Jonathan had given her the day before. The contract inside wasn't just a job offer. It was a validation, a lifeline, a door back into the world Brandon tried to shut her out of. By noon, she met Jonathan again, this time at his firm's temporary workspace inside a renovated historic building near the Brooklyn Bridge. It was bright, modern, filled with natural wood and greenery, the opposite of Brandon's cold corporate environment. Jonathan stood when she entered. "You came," he said, his voice warm. "Of course," Lillian replied, surprising herself. "I want to work again. I need to." "And Wallenwein?" He nodded, guiding her deeper into the space. "Good. Because I didn't offer you this out of pity. You're talented, Lillian. You always were." She swallowed. Praise still felt strange, like she wasn't allowed to accept it after so long being diminished. They walked into the conference room. Blueprints were spread across the table, clean lines, bold shapes, an ambitious luxury project for a hotel redevelopment overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Her pulse quickened. "This is your project," Jonathan said. She glanced up sharply. "Mine?" "But, no," he corrected gently. "Yours. You'd be the lead architect. I trust your vision." The words hit her deeper than she expected. She rested her hands on the edge of the table, staring at the design proposals. A wave of something powerful, relief, pride, disbelief, rolled through her. "Jonathan, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said simply. She did. Undersuit, undersea, undersuit, in the wants and tender sea and dawn undersea. The following days became a quiet transformation. Lillian spent hours sketching on her iPad, reviewing materials, shaping concepts with a focus she hadn't felt since before her pregnancy. The baby kicked often, as if cheering her on. She joked with Jonathan that the child was already bossy, and the warmth in his eyes told her he liked hearing her laugh. At the studio, co-workers she hadn't seen in months congratulated her. Alex brought her hot chocolate every morning. The junior designers listened intently when she spoke. No one treated her like she was fragile. No one dismissed her because she was pregnant. No one tried to silence her ideas. Piece by piece, she was reclaiming her identity. One afternoon, as she reviewed glass facade options, Jonathan approached her with 2 mugs of tea. "You look different today," he observed. "How?" "Like someone who remembered she belongs in the room." The words wrapped around her like a blanket. She looked down at the sketches, at her growing belly, then back at Jonathan. "I want to keep building this," she said. "Not just the project, my life, my future." He smiled softly. "You will, and you won't be doing it alone." Her cheeks warmed not from embarrassment, but from a feeling she hadn't known in a very long time. Possibility. Lillian Harper wasn't just surviving anymore. She was rising. While Lillian rebuilt her life piece by piece, Brandon's world, once polished, powerful, and meticulously curated, began to unravel in ways he never imagined possible. It started subtly. A tense email from the chief financial officer. A canceled investor breakfast. A board meeting rescheduled without explanation. He brushed it all off at first, blaming holiday chaos or overloaded schedules, but the anxiety beneath his ribs grew heavier each day. He couldn't shake the feeling that the ground beneath him was shifting and not in his favor. He found out why on a Tuesday morning. Brandon entered his office on the 39th floor, tossing his coat on the leather chair. Before he could sit, Greg Holloway, the company's general counsel, stepped in with a stiff expression. "We need to talk," Greg said. Brandon frowned. "About what?" Greg shut the door. His tone was controlled but cold. "The board received documentation regarding misuse of corporate funds." Brandon's stomach dropped. "What documentation?" Greg handed him a folder, the same navy folder Lillian had placed on the coffee table weeks earlier, now reproduced with corporate letterheads and legal summaries. Receipts from the Ritz-Carlton. Champagne billed as client entertainment. Aubrey's travel expenses charged to the company card. Suspicious reimbursements tied to consultant meetings. All of it. Exposed. "We're conducting a full audit," Greg continued. "The preliminary findings are not good." Brandon's throat tightened. "This is ridiculous. It's being blown out of proportion." Greg didn't blink. "You used company funds to support a personal affair, Brandon. That's financial misconduct. We can't ignore it." Brandon's pulse hammered in his ears. "Who sent this? Was it my wife?" Greg's silence confirmed the truth. But then came the knife twist. "It wasn't just your wife," he said. "Someone inside your department submitted these as well." Someone inside. A traitor in his own ranks. Brandon's mind raced. Who? Which employee? Who dared betray him? He had built this department. He had mentored these people. They owed him their careers. He stormed into the office floor. Eyes darted away. Conversations abruptly stopped. People refused to meet his gaze. The shift was unmistakable. Fear had turned into suspicion, suspicion into judgment. He wasn't admired anymore. He wasn't envied. He was radioactive. And then the worst blow came. That afternoon, the board demanded his presence. He entered the conference room, expecting a difficult conversation. Instead, he walked into an execution. Aubrey was there, sitting beside the board chair, smiling softly, like she had been invited. Brandon froze. What is she doing here? Aubrey crossed her legs slowly, twirling a pen between her fingers. Oh, Brandon, she purred. They asked for clarity. I simply told the truth. The truth. Her truth. Not his. She laid out everything. The trips, the gifts, the arrangements, the lies, all to save herself. By the time she finished, the board chair spoke with finality. Effective immediately, Brandon. You are suspended pending investigation. His vision blurred. Suspended. Public shame. Loss of power. Loss of control. Everything he built was collapsing. And somewhere across the city, Lillian was rising. The Manhattan family court building was colder than Lillian expected, not just in temperature, but in energy. Echoes of distant footsteps bounced off marble floors. Lawyers hurried past with stacks of documents. Parents whispered anxiously in corners. It felt like a place where lives didn't just change, they split. Maeve walked beside her, calm and unshakable, a soft hand poised protectively at Lillian's back as they entered the courtroom. Lillian's heart pounded, her baby shifting beneath her ribs as if sensing the storm she was walking into. Brandon was already there. He sat on the opposite side of the room, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on her like she was the one who ruined his life, not his mistress, not his ego, not his lies. Aubrey was nowhere in sight. His parents weren't there either. He was alone, but he still tried to look powerful. It didn't work. The judge entered, and the tension in the room tightened like a rope pulled from both ends. Case number 47C182, Harper v. Walsh, Custody Determination Hearing. Brandon's attorney rose, polished and loud. Your Honor, my client is concerned about Miss Harper's mental and emotional stability. She left the marital home abruptly, without notifying Mr. Walsh, and Maeve stood. Your Honor, Miss Harper left because she was forced to. She was abandoned during her pregnancy, publicly humiliated, and emotionally manipulated for months. The judge raised an eyebrow. You have evidence? Maeve lifted a thick binder, the one they'd spent nights preparing. Yes, Your Honor. She approached the bench and presented screenshots of the gala, time-stamped transactions from the Ritz-Carlton, emails showing Brandon's lies, medical notes from Lillian's stress-related hospital visit, and then the most damning piece, Brandon's attempt to transfer Lillian's design copyright behind her back. The judge flipped through the pages with cold, meticulous focus. Brandon shifted, stiff in his seat. His lawyer tried again. Your Honor, my client has the financial stability. Maeve cut in smoothly. Miss Harper has recently accepted a lead architect position under a major firm. Her income is secure, her schedule flexible, and she has a support network. She nodded toward the door where Jonathan stood quietly, respectfully, not entering the room but making sure she was never alone. The judge noticed. Brandon's face reddened. So that's what this is? He muttered under his breath. You found someone already. Lillian finally spoke. Her voice was soft, steady, sharp enough to cut glass. This isn't about you, Brandon. It's about our child, and I will not let you use him the way you used me. A hush fell over the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Walsh, do you dispute the evidence presented? Brandon opened his mouth, but no words came out. Just silence. Heavy, incriminating silence. The judge closed the file. Given the documentation of emotional neglect, misuse of funds, public misconduct, and the stability of Miss Harper's current living arrangements. She paused, letting the weight settle. I award full custody to Miss Harper. Mr. Walsh will receive supervised visitation pending further review. Untracked. Brandon's world collapsed in a single sentence. Lillian exhaled shakily, tears filling her eyes not of fear, but of relief. For the first time, someone powerful had protected her. And this time, it was the law. The custody ruling shook Brandon harder than any board meeting, any headline, any scandal swirling around him. Losing control of Lillian was one thing. He believed he could eventually bully or manipulate his way through that. But losing control of his child, that pierced him in a place even he didn't understand. And yet, fate wasn't done with him. Not even close. 2 days after the hearing, Brandon stormed into his office building, still suspended, still disgraced, but unwilling to accept his fall. He planned to demand a review, threaten lawsuits, force the company to respect him again. Power had always obeyed him. He believed it still would. But the moment he stepped through the glass doors, he sensed it. Stares. Whispers. A quiet, trembling unease. People weren't just avoiding him now. They were watching him. He pushed into his office, slamming the door. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown email address. Check your corporate inbox. You should know who turned on you. He froze. Slowly, hands rigid with dread, he opened his company email. There it was. A forwarded chain of documents. Internal audits. Private messages. Financial irregularities. And a confession. Someone from inside his own department had submitted a whistleblower report to the board before Lillian even filed for divorce. Brandon's eyes scanned feverishly until he found the name. Ethan Cole, his protégé. The one employee he thought worshipped him. No, Brandon whispered, voice cracking. He wouldn't. He slammed his fist on the desk, rage boiling in his chest. Ethan had been with him for 4 years, quiet, ambitious, eager to please. Brandon had handpicked him, groomed him, molded him. And now Ethan had betrayed him? The email continued. I supported him for years, but he crossed every line. The company deserves to know what he did. Lillian didn't deserve to lose her career because he needed control. Brandon read it twice, jaw-dropping. Ethan didn't do it for the company. He didn't do it for morality. He did it for Lillian. The office door opened suddenly. Brandon turned sharply, expecting security. Instead, Ethan stood in the doorway, calm, steady, no longer the timid junior analyst Brandon remembered. We need to talk, Ethan said. Brandon lunged forward, voice cracking. You stabbed me in the back. Ethan didn't flinch. You sabotaged Lillian's work. You spent company money on your affair. You lied to everyone and expected us to clean up after you. I'm done covering for you. Brandon laughed bitterly. Don't tell me you did all this for her. Ethan met his gaze without hesitation. Someone had to. For a moment, Brandon couldn't breathe. Ethan, the quiet shadow who always stood behind him, had become the hand that pushed him off the cliff. You ruined my life, Brandon spit. No, Ethan replied coldly. You did that yourself. He walked out, leaving Brandon trembling, alone with the truth that cut deeper than any punishment. The people he once controlled didn't fear him anymore. Some even despised him. And one of them, someone he underestimated, had chosen Lillian's justice over Brandon's power. Another crack in the empire. Another twist he never saw coming. The second time Lillian stepped into a gala ballroom, everything felt different. Months earlier, she had watched from a dim nursery as Brandon paraded Aubrey across marble floors, cameras flashing like fireworks around them. She had sat alone, humiliated, while the world called her irrelevant. Not tonight. Tonight, the world would remember her name. The New York Design Renaissance Gala was held at the iconic Plaza Hotel, the same ballroom Brandon once used as a stage for betrayal. The same chandeliers that had watched her humiliation would now witness her rise. As Lillian approached the entrance, reporters turned. Guests paused mid-conversation. Conversations softened into whispers. Her presence carried a quiet gravity, a glow that wasn't about glamour, it was about survival, dignity, and the kind of strength that comes from rebuilding yourself piece by painful piece. She wore a simple midnight blue gown, elegant without screaming for attention. Her hair was softly curled, resting over her shoulders. The baby bump beneath the fabric was unmistakable, but instead of hiding it, she carried it with pride. A symbol of what she fought for. A symbol Brandon could never claim again. Jonathan greeted her at the top of the carpet, his smile warm and steady. You look incredible, he whispered. So do you, she said, letting him offer his arm as they walked inside. The ballroom stirred like a wave. People who once pitied her now looked at her with admiration. People who had whispered about her now fell silent. People who remembered the scandal now witnessed the truth. She hadn't broken. She had transformed. As they moved deeper into the crowd, industry leaders approached her. "Lillian, your latest proposal is brilliant. We've been hoping you'd come back to the field. Jonathan is lucky to have you on his team." Not a single mention of Brandon. Not a single whisper of pity. Only respect. Only recognition. Only Lillian. Halfway through the evening, Jonathan guided her toward the stage, where she would be presented with an award for Emerging Visionary Architect of the Year. When her name was announced, applause erupted, genuine, thunderous, overwhelming. Lillian froze, emotion catching in her throat. Jonathan leaned close. "Go," he murmured. "You earned this." She walked toward the podium, each step steady, each breath grounding her. When she reached the microphone, she scanned the room, faces glowing beneath chandeliers, all waiting for her voice. "Thank you," she began, her tone soft but resolute. "This year broke me in ways I didn't expect, but it also rebuilt me in ways I never imagined." A hush fell. "I lost things I thought were permanent. I found strength I didn't know I had. And tonight is proof that life doesn't end when someone stops choosing you. Sometimes, that's when life finally begins." The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was powerful. A wave of acknowledgement, of solidarity, of awe. From the corner of the room, a familiar figure watched, jaw tight, eyes dark. Brandon. No Aubrey beside him. No applause from his hands. Just the bitter taste of seeing the woman he once tried to break, rising on a stage he believed would always belong to him. Brandon Walsh had always believed two things. That power protected him, and that women, especially women who loved him, would never walk away. But that night at the plaza, as he watched Lillian standing on the stage he once dominated, receiving the applause he believed belonged only to him, something inside him snapped like a rotted beam under too much weight. He slipped out of the ballroom before the applause even died, fury burning beneath his skin. The world was supposed to admire him, not her. Never her. But fate wasn't finished teaching him what he truly was. And not Proves, and 100, and 100, and 100. 2 mornings later, Brandon arrived at the corporate tower where he once strode like a king. His ID badge didn't scan. He tried again. Red light. Access denied. The security guard approached, stiff and uncomfortable. "Mr. Walsh, your privileges have been suspended pending the board's vote." "What vote?" Brandon snapped. The guard swallowed. "Your removal from the company." Brandon froze. "That's impossible. I built this division." A voice interrupted him. "Actually, you gutted it." He people $7. Standing behind him was Diana Wells, the board chair. A woman he once bragged about charming over expensive wine. Now her expression was sharp, businesslike, untainted by the flattery he once wielded like a weapon. "We received the full whistleblower report," she said. "Every detail, every violation, every misuse of corporate funds." His stomach twisted. Ethan again. Of course it was Ethan. Brandon forced a laugh. "This is outrageous. I'll sue the board." You won't," Diana said coldly, "because if you push this, the criminal investigation will escalate. You could face indictment." The word hit him like a punch. Indictment. He felt sweat prick at the base of his neck. "You can't do this. I have a family." "No," Diana corrected. "You had one." His heart dropped. "Effective immediately," she continued. "You are terminated from your position at Walsh Harrington Tech, and the board will pursue repayment of all misused funds. And everyone's." The lobby went dead silent. Employees paused mid-step. Some stared, some whispered, some smirked. Brandon felt every pair of eyes slicing through him. His empire, everything he had built, crumbled with one sentence. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. "Diana, please. Just give me time. I can fix this." "There's nothing left to fix," she said. "And Brandon," she leaned in, her voice a razor, "your wife deserved better. Is it if 70? And that's not persevenation, today's 40 indation. In outwanhum a sums of everything." Brandon stumbled outside into the cold Manhattan wind, gasping like a man drowning on dry land. As he reached the sidewalk, his phone buzzed. "Aubrey Sloan." He answered instantly. "Aubrey, thank God." But her tone held no warmth. "Brandon, I can't be associated with you anymore. This fallout, it's bad for my brand." He blinked. Your brand? Aubrey, I'm blocking your number, she interrupted. Good luck. The call ended. Brandon stared at his reflection in the tower's dark glass, bleary-eyed, suit rumpled, stripped of arrogance, stripped of allies, stripped of everything he used to believe made him untouchable. He was alone, utterly, devastatingly alone. And somewhere across the city, the woman he tried to break was building a future he would never be part of again. Spring arrived softly in New York, cherry blossoms blooming along the Brooklyn Heights promenade, the river shimmering under morning sun, the city humming with renewed life. For the first time in a long time, Lillian Harper felt that same renewal stirring inside her. Maeve's apartment had become a temporary haven, but now she was moving into her own space, a bright, sunlit two-bedroom near the waterfront. Boxes sat stacked against the walls, baby clothes folded neatly in baskets, and her architectural models spread across a new oak desk. She ran her fingers over the smooth surface, imagining what her life would look like from here on. Free. Secure. Hers. A knock sounded at the door. When she opened it, Jonathan stood there, holding a small bouquet of spring flowers, nothing extravagant, just soft yellows and whites, humble but thoughtful. You didn't have to bring those, she said, cheeks warming. I didn't have to, he replied, but I wanted to. He stepped inside, looking around the apartment with quiet admiration. It suits you, he said. Warm, open, alive. Lillian smiled. It feels like a beginning. Jonathan met her eyes. It is. They spent the next hour assembling the crib. Well, Jonathan assembled it, and Lillian handed him screws, while laughing every time he muttered about impossible Swedish instructions. When he finally finished, he stepped back, hands on his hips, and for one. There, he said proudly. Completely level. It's perfect, she whispered. Her hand drifted to her belly as the baby kicked. Jonathan watched her with a softness that made her chest tighten, a warmth she had long forgotten. Lillian, he said carefully, I know you've been through more than most people could survive. But I want you to know something. She looked up, heart fluttering. You're not defined by what he did to you. You're defined by what you did after. Her breath caught, and what if, he hesitated, the first time she'd seen him unsure, in your next chapter you didn't have to walk alone? The room went still. Lillian searched his face not for perfection, not for promises, but for sincerity. She found it in the steady way he looked at her, not as someone broken, but as someone strong enough to choose her future. Jonathan, she whispered, are you asking? I'm asking, he said gently. If you'd let me be part of the life you're rebuilding, you and the baby. Tears welled in her eyes, but these were not tears of hurt. These were the kind that washed away the last remnants of the past. She stepped closer. Yes, she said softly, I'd like that. Jonathan exhaled, relief and joy crossing his face. He pulled her into a careful embrace, mindful of her belly, holding her with a tenderness she had never known with Brandon. Outside the window, the city glowed. Her child would grow in love, not fear. Her career was thriving. Her dignity was restored. And the man who tried to break her was left in the ruins of his own making. Lillian Harper didn't just survive. She won. And this time, life was finally hers. So, that's how the story ends, my wonderful friends. You're still here with me, all the way until now, aren't you? If you're listening to this part, then something in Lillian's journey touched your heart in a way only real life can. And maybe, just maybe, it reminded you of something in your own story. What she went through wasn't just betrayal, it was rebirth. A reminder of a powerful Stoic truth Marcus Aurelius once wrote. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Her pain became her path. Her loss became her strength. And her ending became a beginning she truly deserved. Life will break us at times quietly, suddenly, unfairly. But healing begins the moment we choose ourselves. The moment we walk away from what hurts and step toward what honors our worth. Lillian did that, and so can you. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel seen, understood, or a little less alone, then let's keep going together. Like, share, and subscribe so more people can find stories that remind them of their strength, too. You matter. Your future matters. And your comeback is never too late to start.